It's about 5 after. Let's go ahead and try to get a seat. And also, we have a sign-up sheet if you'd like to speak. That's right here on the front, right in front of me. We'd like for you we'll start in 3 or 4 minutes. If you will, just come if you'd like to speak at some point at the end. We got a sign-up sheet here, but give us a few minutes and we'll be ready to start.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Frank Ginn, and my co-chair said, co-pilot here said, you're in the pilot seat on the helicopter, but I'm on the one on the airplane. I think that's what we do here. Said but it's good to have everybody here for our airport infrastructure meeting. Senator Harper is here. I want to thank Senator Harper for introducing the legislation to actually do something that's constructive. And I know Tyler's very talented. He's the only guy that I know that can chew bubble gum, sing and dance and play the piano at the same time. So he may have some other aspirations on something he's doing, but I am glad to have him on our committee. And I'm going to ask Tyler if you would start, just work our way down there, committee members, and let everybody kind of introduce themselves. So you got microphone number 5.
Well, I'll share this with Senator Halpern. Good morning, Tyler Harper from Ocilla, Georgia. Served the 7th Senate District, 10 counties in South Central, Southeast Georgia. And more importantly, I'm a pilot, and I use these 103 or so public airports around the state. And I think this is just a very important opportunity for us, especially considering the need of our airports. I know we did this in regards to roads and bridges a few years ago. And I was a member of that committee, and I think we made a lot of strides into addressing the needs of our roads and bridges around the state. But our airports are a significant source of economic driver in this state, especially in rural communities across this state. I'm glad that y'all have an interest, and I look forward to the opportunities we get to hopefully address this issue and ensure that our airports continue to be a strong economic driver for the state of Georgia, especially in rural Georgia. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Senator Sonia Halpern. I represent District 39, which is right here in Fulton County, 5 cities, neighborhoods in 5 cities: Atlanta, College Park, East Point, City of South Fulton, and Union City. Glad to be part of this study committee. Obviously, to Senator Harper's point, transportation is very key to our state, and moving goods, services, and people is integral to that. So excited about the work we're going to do here.
Oh, it's working. All right. Philip Singleton. I represent District 71 in Coweta State House. like Tyler, like every good pilot, you know how to know if there's a pilot in the room? Yeah, he'll tell you. So I also am a pilot. I flew for the Army 15 years, helicopters. You can fly from either seat, Mr. Chairman. It's fine. And I currently am a commercial airline pilot for American Airlines. So, you know, I'm very excited about this committee. It's something I really wanted to be on because, you know, I tend to be very hesitant with government spending. You know, but there's absolutely things that are vitally important that the government spends money on, and infrastructure and something like this that has the economic impact it does is so important that we do. So I'm just really happy to be here and I hope I can be helpful.
Ben, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself because, you know, for me, it's good staff that makes all of us look good down here.
So good morning. My name is Ben Lyon. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Senate Research Office, and I'll be at the Senate side staff for this committee going forward.
And of course, I'm Frank Ginn. I chair the Transportation Committee. Said I took flight lessons a long time ago. Said the same guy that taught me to fly taught my daughter to fly. The only thing I remember is that whatever plane I'm in, whatever I'm up in the air doing, I can land the plane. I'm not sure if anybody walks away from it or not, but I can land the plane. Chairman?
Oh, my. Hey, but thank you, Chairman Ginn. And I'm Rick Jaspers. I'm the House co-chairman, and glad to be here. You know, when this came through the House, and you know, I carried it on the floor for Senator Harper. Yeah, I was kind of excited about it because in transportation, you know, I guess hurts your feelings a little bit. You know, we know a lot about road transportation. You know, that's the thing that I'm on every time. I have a great little small airport in my town, but learning all about the funding and how it works, and it's something I did not and do not know about. And I'm looking forward to learning a lot about it. I have a member here, Chairman Knight, on the end that's very, very interested in the education and job creation around airports. And I appreciate you being here, David, because our committee on appropriations is working on that too, which is just hand in hand. Learned a lot at Peachtree DeKalb the other day when we met there. But I too, you know, just like Frank, like Ben Lyon is I have Abby Day, who is just famous in the transportation world, and called her this morning like, oh, you might be on vacation, but maybe you're not. Can you help me do this? And I appreciate you, Abby. We'll turn it to you.
I'm Abby Day. I'm the Transportation Budget and Policy Analyst for the House Budget Office. And famous, I guess.
My own. I'm John LaHood, representative for District 175 in South Georgia. My home is Brooks County, next door to Valdosta. You know, personally, I own and operate several businesses and communities throughout Georgia. Each one of those communities has a general aviation airport. I'm also a pilot, and that's how I get around most of the time to check on businesses there, and we employ a lot of people. And you know, having an airport in the communities we do business in is vital. Grew up in an aviation family and of entrepreneurs, and it's always been that way with our family. And I'm excited to be on this committee and see how I can contribute.
Commissioner McMurray said I'm going to let you. You got it.
I got it. Good morning. I'm Russell McMurray, Commissioner for the Georgia Department of Transportation. I just want to again commend the Joint Study Committee for forming. It is a great day, as already been talked about, how important transportation infrastructure is, and especially aviation. Proud to have many of our members here today. We have Carol Comer, Director of Intermodal, will give a presentation. Leanne Trainer is here, as well as Steve Bryan, who's our aviation manager for the state. And one key component of all forms of transportation is obviously aviation, and already a lot of excitement said this morning. So we look forward to a robust discussion, and anything that we can do at the Department of Transportation to provide information and data to help inform deliberation and decisions out of this joint committee, we stand ready to do so. So thank you. And Abbey Day is famous, by the way.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't see Commissioner Pat Wilson here. Should the, so we're going to slide over him and go ahead, Robert. I got you on. Whichever one you want. I'll give you 2 or 3. There you go.
I'm Robert.
Thank you very much. That's number 5, I believe.
Hi, good morning. I'm Larry Wade. I'm the owner and operator of Golden Isles Aviation, which is on St. Simon's Island at the airport there. Robert's our executive director for that airport. So I'm on the business side of it. I'm on the service provider side in terms of general aviation. But also I'm a board member of the National Air Transportation Association. So we see it from a national level, and that's a industry association group that represents FBOs, like what we do, the service providers, MROs, which are the maintenance operation, the service aircraft and maintain them and so forth. And the other is charter, which is vitally important towards folks that don't have aircraft that want to rent an aircraft and a pilot to get somewhere. So we get to see that from that perspective in DC, but also on the board with Phillips 66 Aviation and World Fuel Air Elite, which is a group of FBOs. So very excited for your interest to take a look at our airports in Georgia and see about their funding, get to experience it like you guys do in terms of flying around it. And we see business move on the airports every day. We see economic development move. We're at airports where we are. So thank you for spending the time to look at how we support these airports and get economic development and safety up there.
Thank you, Larry. And our illustrious Chris Clark. Anything going on with the chamber?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Chris Clark, President of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Happy to be part of this committee, and I'll get a little more detail later this morning. So thanks for having me as part of this.
Thank you. I think that's number 8.
I'm Ken Warnock from Swainsboro. I'm responsible for Swainsboro-Manuel County Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Authority. So we've got the economic development side there, but I've also been the chairman of the East Georgia Regional Airport Commission for about 22 years. Seen our airport go through a lot of changes, and hope to learn more about ways of getting some extra funding out of the state and the feds for improvements at the airport. I'm also a pilot, by the way.
And Hope, I think you're number 10.
I am Hope Macaluso. I'm the airport manager at Atlanta Regional Airport, Falcon Field, and Peachtree City. We're one of the busier general aviation airports in the state. My background is I have a degree in professional aviation. I'm a private pilot. I worked at New Orleans International Airport, Hartsfield. I worked for American Airlines for 6 years. LaGrange Callaway Airport for 5 years, and I've been at Atlanta Regional for 10.
Thank you. Good to have you here. I'm not sure if I've got all of our committee members introduced or not that are here. I may not recognize somebody's face, but I think that covers us.
I'd like to recognize the operations team. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Knight, out of District 130, Spalding County, Lamar, and a little bit of Henry. And again, to the chairman, appreciate your invite to come in and sit on this committee. As you stated, the Appropriations Higher Ed Committee is also looking in and has been visiting and going around the state looking at the workforce needs in the aviation industry. And I just will echo a lot of what has been said. The aviation industry in Georgia is I would say, vibrant. We are lucky to have as much aviation and then the industries we have in Georgia all across the board, from commercial down to manufacturing. And is very important, and I appreciate what the committee's doing. And as we begin to look at this from the whole ecosystem of aviation in Georgia, I really appreciate the thought and the study that's being put into it. Thank you.
Thank you. We got to worry about him sharpening that pencil too much on us. These accountants do that. Said they, good to have you here with us, David. One of the things that for me, just so everybody's on the right page, we've got a first couple meetings set up. The next meeting that we'll have will be at the Airport Association, or right prior to the Airport Association meeting down at St. Simons or Glenn County. Get some details out to you on that. I know that and I like to joke about the 800-pound gorilla in the rooms at Atlanta Hartsfield. Said and for me, when I look, I know that my esteemed colleague in the Senate, Senator Halpern, is looking forward to having us there. I'm not sure the dates, and we'll try to get you something on it. We do want to do one of the airport. Me and Commissioner McMurray had talked, and one of the airports that we wanted to visit up northeast Georgia is the Jackson County Airport. Said and do that, and we'll get details on making that opportunity kind of a business. It's right on 85. It's one of those things that, when you start looking at what's going on in the business community, and that's really what we're trying to do, is help promote Georgia businesses and grow the state and grow the economy of the state. And that's where, as taxpayers, we all look
House
for
Bill
return on
856 by
investment.
Representative Burns, 159th, bill being titled Act to amend Article 2, Chapter 7, Title 48 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia annotated, relating the imposition rate, computation, exemptions from income tax. I'll stop.
Not sure exactly what we got going there. Said but let me start off and with our meeting
House Bill
today, we have a
857
couple
by Representative
speakers.
Burns on the 59th, bill being titled Act to amend Atlanta Urban Enterprise Zone Act, approved March 24th, 1988.
Okay, hopefully that's going to work.
And then I'll say something to the effect that completes the reading, first readers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the technical
Another
audio.
House bill by Representative Burns on 59th to be entitled Act to amend Chapter 10, Title 28 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia annotated, relating to the regulation of fireworks.
There is a ghost in the room. I'm going to get away from this microphone, and if I could ask Carol Comer to come up and talk to us, because there's the true queen of aviation, transportation, intermodal, anything you want to know, Carol's it. So great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Chairman Ginn and Chairman Jaspers, member of the committee, and Commissioner. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about our statewide aviation system plan and talk a little bit about funding and needs. How do I advance the slides? Oops. Is DJ somewhere?
I understand they're in the House chamber testing the microphone is what we got. So.
Okay. Okay. All right, that sounds good. All right, so we'll go to the first slide. The next slide, let me say that. First of all, we'll define what our statewide aviation system is here in Georgia. It consists of 105 public use airports. We have 103 publicly owned public use airports. And the public use designation is significant because by Georgia statute, we are required to inspect and license all the airports in Georgia, with the exception of the commercial service airports, for a minimum level of safety. So we have 2 privately owned airports that are open to the public. So that's where the 105 comes from. Our 103 publicly owned public use airports consist of 8 commercial service airports and 95 general aviation airports. Previously, you may have seen that number at 9 commercial service airports and 94 GAs, and that's because the Athens Ben Epps Airport currently does not have commercial airline service. They've had it in the past, and they're currently working on reinstating that, but presently they don't. And the public use designation is significant because in Georgia, all of our public use airports, with the exception of Hartsfield, is eligible for state funding under our state airport aid program. And we'll talk about federal funding eligibility in just a little bit. We also, it's interesting, we have about 327 private airports, of almost 8,000 registered aircraft and about 17,000 registered pilots, which we have many in the room today. Next slide, please.
Before you leave that slide, on the registered aircraft, do you have any idea what the total volume of that monetary tax base would be to the state?
Actually, we don't, because it's, they're registered in a particular county and those taxes are obviously assessed there. So I don't think we have a total number. Steve, do we have a total number of that out of the economic impact study? We'll give you an IOU to give you that information. Next slide, please. And then we also, I know that the legislature has a freight and logistics study commission, and thought it was interesting to highlight for everyone that we have 7 airports that have air cargo service, scheduled air cargo service, and we have more than 50 other airports that have ad hoc air cargo service. And just an interesting note, if you look over in LaGrange and Troup County, they have a tremendous amount. It's not scheduled, it's ad hoc. A lot of cargo service in and out of there to service the Kia plant, to bring in parts and other things to keep their manufacturing facility running. Next slide, please. I thought it would be interesting for a moment to, we have all these airports, but to give a little bit of perspective of how we got where we are today. Where did all these airports come from? And it's interesting, more than half of the airports were built during the 1940s in support of World War II. And even though that was 80 some years ago, it's interesting, we still have a lot of that pavement that's 80 years old on those airports. The next most significant period of airport development in Georgia came during the 1960s when Carl Sanders was governor. Governor Sanders was a B-17 pilot in World War II. And when he came home from the service, went to law school, and then continued to be a private pilot, had a Piper Comanche. And when he decided to run for governor, he used his airplane to travel around the state, that's particularly the rural areas, to campaign. And the one thing that he recognized when he was traveling is that he couldn't get everywhere. And he thought, if I can't get there, neither can business and industry. So once he was elected, he set out to build approximately 40 more airports. He went to FAA and asked them if they would give $100,000 per airport. The state would chip in $50,000. The locals chipped in $50,000. And for $200,000, he built a piece. He built those 40 airports. They were 3,400 feet in length. We have a project currently on our books to build a replacement airport in Griffin and Spalding County, and the price tag on that airport today is probably around $80 million. So times have definitely changed, but certainly a tip of the hat to Governor Sanders, for his efforts in recognizing the importance of airports and economic development and providing that access to rural parts of the state. We also, in 1998, the next most significant period of development was when Governor Zell Miller was in his last year in office, and he came to the legislature and asked that $35 million be appropriated to upgrade 27 what we call regional airports, and I'll explain those classifications in a moment, to extend those runways to 5,500 feet to support opportunities for economic development. Then in 2005, Governor Perdue, who was also a pilot and also used his aircraft to campaign in, he had a little Blanca Viking. I used to see him all around the state when I would go check on projects campaigning, but he also recognized the importance of expanding the system to support economic development. So Governor Perdue asked the legislature for $28 million to upgrade 18 of our business airports. And those are airports that we extended runways to 5,000 feet. In 2018, Governor Deal continued to recognize the importance of airports and economic development in the rural parts of the state and asked the legislature to appropriate $26 million to extend runways to 5,000 feet at 11 rural airports. So those are, again, extremely, just an interesting history of how the airports have developed. But one of the themes here, starting in 1998, is all of the funding requests for expansion and enhancements to the airport system came from our state aviation systems plan. They were projects that were identified in our comprehensive plan. So next slide, please. And so our state aviation system plan, we update it every 10 to 15 years, kind of dependent upon the availability of funding to do so. And our last update was concluded in 2019. And really, the state aviation systems plan is a blueprint for development for our airport system. I think everyone recognizes that we don't need a Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in every community. We need different levels of airports to accommodate different types of aircraft. And so the overarching goal of the systems plan has always been to provide every Georgian to be within a 60-minute drive of a commercial service airport, a 45-minute drive of an airport with a 5,500-foot runway, which can accommodate 95% of the corporate aircraft that fly today. We also want to see every Georgian within a 30-minute drive of a runway that's 5,000 feet in length, because that will accommodate 85% of the corporate aircraft that fly. So those are kind of the basic tenets of the systems plan. But again, it really provides that blueprint for development. And when we update the plan, we always take a snapshot and evaluate our current performance, how we're doing. Yes, sir, Chairman Jasper.
If you don't mind me interrupting, we like to do that probably. Frank and I do, but okay, so it seems to me like, I'm learning about this, that 5,000 feet is the goal. So of all those airports you listed in the previous slide, where are we at on getting them to 5,000 feet?
Well, if you'll hold that question, I'm going to
Okay,
show you that in just a second.
Okay, thank you.
But anyway, so we evaluate our performance and see how much progress we've made. And you will see that significant progress has been made because of those 3 special funding programs that were put forth by Governors Miller, Perdue, and Governor Deal. But we always, when we update the systems plan, we're looking at new technologies, changes in the industry, how aircraft are changing. Do they require more runway length, less runway length? And evaluating our objectives and reaffirming or adding new ones. And then probably one of the most critical things that the systems plan does for us is it helps us prioritize the investment in the system. So when we do have state and federal dollars, we're able to make certain that those projects are consistent with our systems plan. Next slide, please. And just to give you a little brief overview of the systems planning process, we actually go in, we do a physical inventory of every airport. So we have consultants and staff members who visit every facility and itemize all of the infrastructure, runways, taxiways, what kind of fuel do they sell, how many airplanes are there. And then we take all of that information, we look at some of the national trends, and we forecast what we think the use of the facilities is going to be, how much the operational characteristics of the airport. Then we take that information, we evaluate it, and we go back and we assign all of the airports a role. Those 5,500-foot airports or level 3 airports, 5,000 foot runways or level twos. So we reevaluate those roles and ensure that the airport is serving that we haven't, let me go back and say this, that the roles are determined based on population and other factors. And so we evaluate the factors. If have any changes, then we reaffirm the roles, or occasionally we will change a role. And in this systems plan, we did. We actually upgraded our recommendation for the Hinesville Liberty County Airport. It was previously a level 2 facility, and now in this systems plan, it's a level 3. But generally, those have stayed stable over the last 30 years. But we then go in and look at the facility objectives and estimate cost for any of the gaps that we have and what we recommend the facilities be, and then finalize that into a plan. We obviously are very fortunate to receive some federal funding to conduct this study. And so it's done in accordance with all the federal guidelines. And also we take our study and provide that to FAA to help inform their national airport plan. We also ask at the conclusion of the study that the individual airport summaries, that the airport owners take those and consider those when they're doing their airport master planning. Next slide. At the end of the study, we produced a lot of documentation, and we actually provided copies of the executive summary for the systems plan for you today for the committee members. And all of this information is also available on our DOT website. But we have published a technical report, which has, kind of all of the meat and the data and how we drew the conclusions. We summarize all the information in the executive summary, and then we provide, I think, some that's very valuable, individual airport reports. And those contain specific airport recommendations, sort of a report card on how well the airport is performing based on the prior system plan recommendations. Gives us, again, estimated cost. And we also look at land use compatibility around the airport, and also look at runway protection zones, and try to ensure that those are free from encroachments. And then we also provided a multimedia video highlighting the study findings and recommendations. And if we have time today, I'll be happy to show that to you. Next slide, please. And so we talked a little bit about kind of the heart and soul of the systems plan is that stratification of the airports, the varying runway lengths to provide those service objectives. And so in addition to the length of the runway, we also have criteria for widths of the runway, different instrument approach procedures to be able to ensure all weather or almost all weather landing capability, and also weather reporting. Next slide, please. And we talked again about how important runway length is, and our highest level of airport are the ones that we recommend 5,500 foot runway. And again, a tremendous tie for business and industry to be able to access our communities, and for our communities to be able to have access to other airports nationally and even globally in order to conduct business. And our former GDOT Commissioner, Wayne Shackelford, always said that business prospects don't arrive in your town on a Greyhound bus. They fly into the airport. And so just absolutely critical to have that runway length to accommodate the current fleet of business and corporate aircraft. Next slide.
That slide, excuse me. When it says, I'm looking in the books, I can see it a little bit better. What is a study airport? You've got the greater than 5,000, greater than 6,000. There's something's called a study airport.
I think when they said study airports, the only airport that we did not include in the study was Hartsfield.
Okay.
So it's all the study airports were the 102 publicly owned public use airports.
Thank you.
Could you go back to the previous slide? Oh, And Chairman Jasper, Russell pointed out that the question that you had, this right here is a map of all of the airports, and the blue areas denote the travel time from each of those level 3 airports to the surrounding community. And so you can see that we have excellent coverage. You see 2 big gaps, and one of them is the Okefenokee Swamp, which probably have a little difficulty getting an airport in there. And also you see an area in the North Georgia mountains. Very, very difficult to construct an airport in that particular area. Good. Next slide. And so you ask about system performance. And so when we look at the number of the ability for our citizens to have a 60-minute access to a commercial service airport, we're currently at 85%. Our 45-minute drive time to an airport with a 5,500-foot runway is at 97.7%. And that number is, we have worked on that, and that number would not be there had it not been for the program that was requested by Governor Zell Miller, where we upgraded 27 of those airports in the late 90s and early 2000s. The 30-minute drive time to a 5,000-foot runway, we're currently at 92%. And again, that infusion of capital into the program under Governor Perdue and also Governor Deal gave us a tremendous boost for those ratings. And then another performance measure that we look at is the condition of our airfield pavements. And currently we have 81% of our pavements that have a condition rating over a 70. Our goal in the systems plan is to have a rating over an 80, and that's the requirement that FAA has for most airports. Next slide, please.
If you don't mind, Ms. Carroll, on that pavement thing of a 70 to an 80, is that just a time thing? Do we do similar as we do to roads? We take a machine out and grade it every how many years that we look at something like that?
Well, I would say on the airport side of the house, we have most of our asphalt pavements. We're very fortunate in the climate here in Georgia. We typically see at least a 15-year life. In some areas of the state, we may can eat 20 years out. But you know, certainly the pavement, once you put it down, the aging process starts and it starts to deteriorate. And again, different areas geographically in the state, some will deteriorate a little faster. Also, the amount of traffic that the pavement has on it. Actually, the more traffic in some cases actually keeps it in a little better condition. So sometimes just, you know, sitting there, you know, the aging process takes place.
I guess, go ahead, Mr. Russell. You're number 2, I think. Commissioner, go ahead.
Commissioner's
Did I
number
get you?
1.
We'll punch them all.
Yeah, so the airport rating pavement index there is every 5 years, a little different than roadways when you look on an annual basis. But so that is a little bit of a 5 year, 5 years, not understanding is the condition assessment. So it is always a snapshot in time, but just like everything, everybody's got a birthday, it always gets older. And that's why, again, conditions are 81% at 70. You're trying to target a higher threshold. So pavements generally, you have a degradation. If you don't do rehabilitation and maintenance, then it costs you more the longer you wait. So that's why you want to have a higher percent. So you're always rehabilitating and taking good care so the condition level never dips down. So I don't know off the top of my head, I'm not sure what Carolyn spotted how the previous condition levels were prior year, and then maybe we'll come back to you and show you what the pavement conditions have been doing over time.
Yeah, I was just curious how.
Yes.
You're right, it was a snapshot of time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I see that you said that 81% or 70 or better, but the FAA is looking for 80% or better. What's the percentage of airports that have that 80%? And Commissioner, I appreciate you bringing up that point. I remember going to the GAA annual meetings, y'all would do a pavement assessment study and say what was actually the money that needed to be invested to get the pavement up to standards. And it was quite a bit. And of course, we didn't have that. And said, but if we don't get this money, we're going to be spending a lot more money later because it gets deeper into the structure and so forth. And we have to do more expensive processes and so forth. But so how many meet, or what percentage meets the 80%?
And Larry, I don't have that number in my hip pocket, but I can tell you it's certainly less than 50%.
Okay.
So yeah, we have a lot that hover, right around 70. And so when we look at the performance of our facility objectives, which again, runway length, runway width, taxiways, our lighting systems, approach areas, are they clear? Our nav aids, weather reporting, facilities on the airport, such as terminal buildings and hangars, apron areas for parking and tie downs, fuel, FBOs, aircraft maintenance, and also rental cars. From 2002, that is the dark bar, and then the lighter blue bar is what our performance rating was for the study update. And again, you can see that we've made some tremendous strides in that 15-year period. And again, primarily due to those special funding programs that helped us improve the infrastructure. Let's see. And when looking at runway length, we're meeting 83% of the system plan objectives. With those special funding programs, we were able, I won't say to pick the low-hanging fruit, but we were able to do those projects that were very constructible. The remaining 17% of the runway extensions that we need, those are the difficult projects. Those are ones that require tremendous land acquisition, relocations, have environmental issues with serious mitigation, and obviously terrain issues where tremendous amounts of fill material, which will contribute to the construction cost, are needed. So next slide, please. And so our recommended airport system recommendations from this study, like I said, not very much changed this time. All of the roles were reaffirmed with the exception that we elevated the Liberty County Airport to a level 3. We continued to carry forward a recommendation for a new general aviation airport in the Dawson-Forsyth County area to fill in a hole in the system there. And then we carried forward a replacement airport for the Griffin-Spalding County Airport and in St. Mary's. The Griffin-Spalding County Airport project is underway, and the St. Mary's Camden County Airport project is still being formulated at the local level. They're looking to identify an airport sponsor and also finalize a funding plan. Next slide. And so when you look at the gaps that we see versus the recommendations versus what's actually been constructed, we have approximately $1.3 billion in projects, which are going to be, again, runway extension projects, other facility improvements, runway protection zone mitigation projects, our pavement rehabilitation projects, and also the projects for the 3 replacement airports.
Say that number one more time. Make sure everybody understands.
$1.3 billion in investment would be required to construct the recommendations from the systems plan. Next slide, please. And so we'll go through here. We annualize these costs. And so from the systems plan, the annualized cost would be approximately $269 million in funding would be required to help us achieve that goal. One of the things that the systems plan doesn't, it considers it, but the cost and projects aren't included, are each airport is required by FAA and the state to have a 5-year capital improvement program. And so each year the airports update those plans, and in those plans that are developed at the local level, there were an additional $142 million in projects that were identified locally that were not identified in our systems plan. So when you add those projects, you have a total deficit each year of $411 million. Well, I'm sorry, $411 million in need. And then our average annual federal funding is approximately $52 million, and average state funding has been around 16. We're at 17 this year for a total of 68. So that puts an annual funding deficit of about $343 million. Next slide. So we want to talk a little bit about project funding eligibility, what's eligible under the federal program versus under the state program, because our programs are different.
I want to
yes, sir.
step back. Let's have them back you up one. Yeah, maybe I'm a little slow. It kinda
No.
has to drive through there. you
Not
know.
at all.
So I know there's this relationship between federal funds and how much we put in. Are we at the maximum we can draw down from the federal government, or how? I know there's some relationship there, and I'm not exactly. Could you explain the relationship?
Yes, I can. The federal funding works, there are 3 different buckets of federal funding. And the first bucket is a entitlement that each airport that is recognized in FAA system is entitled to. For commercial service airports, it's about $1 million. And for our general aviation airports, it's approximately $150,000 annually. You have to meet certain criteria to qualify for that amount. And then, so that's the entitlement bucket. So that comes as long as Congress, has an appropriations bill. The second bucket is a state apportioned bucket that is for our general aviation airports. And it's a formula amount that we receive each year. And right now it fluctuates a little bit. It's around 5.6 million currently. And then there is, and this is where it's hard to answer your question, Chairman Jaspers, because there's a variable pot. There's a discretionary bucket. And those are funds that are available from FAA, but each airport has to compete for those dollars, and they compete nationally with 5,000 other airports in the federal system. So there's no guarantee on those discretionary dollars in any given year. So for the general aviation airports, the entitlement and the state apportionment piece probably adds up to around 18 or 19 million each year. On the commercial service side, you're looking at probably, I think there's around 12 million. There's a little air cargo entitlement also. And then again, the discretionary bucket, we submit all of our projects every year along with the air carrier projects, and, do our best to be very competitive. So, we can see anywhere on the GA side, maybe 30 million. We've had some years as low as 25. And this year, let's see, this year was a little over 30, around 32 million.
Just on that discretionary, do the local general aviation airports work with you? Do they have to create their plan, and then y'all help them be competitive with those other 5,000 airports?
Yes, sir, we do.
Across the nation?
Yes, sir, we do. And FAA has a priority ranking system for projects. And so we, certainly, and I'll say for funding eligibility for both the federal and the state program, the #1 priority for funding projects are safety-related projects. After those, FAA is focused on capacity projects, those that are expanding the system. And so we work with the airports to identify projects that will compete well. that are consistent with FAA's priority ranking system. So safety projects and pavement rehabilitation projects compete reasonably well.
I believe Mr. Wade has a question.
Oh, yes, thank you. Carol, I don't know, I've never heard this address or answer this. So have we been at times in state funding where we had federal money available for projects? We could have done it, but we didn't have the state portion of that, so we did not do the project?
I will say that in my 20, almost 25 years with the state, that has not ever happened. We always prioritize our state dollars to match all the federal dollars.
So there would be, I mean, we're getting the max out of the feds. The feds wouldn't have invested any more in us than that.
The discretionary is whether we're awarded discretionary dollars or not, we just don't have any control over that other than to do absolutely the best job that we can to put forth those projects that will be competitive.
So do we only ask for discretionary dollars that we know we can match? Is that how that goes?
What we would do is for any state dollars that we have, we would defer a state and local project. If we were short on money, FAA came tomorrow and said, here's $50 million, we would probably defer a state and locally funded project in order to be able to match those federal dollars. That is our number one priority, is to match the federal dollars.
So we do find ourselves short in terms of maybe what we could have. I'm just thinking, when you get 9-to-1 money, you always want to invest in that. That's a great investment.
Absolutely.
And if we can't take advantage of that because we are short on funds.
We are, I would say we are maximizing every opportunity to compete for federal dollars, and we are matching every federal dollar that we get.
Thank you, Mr. Wade, that you got down to the nitty gritty of it.
Representative Singleton.
Yeah, so just another question to piggyback on that, because we haven't really talked about the municipality or the county level funding that's associated. So that, all of these projects that you're talking about obviously there's a large piece of that requirement that comes from that county municipality. Do we have a threshold of, state and federal dollars to local municipal dollars for this? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Can you speak to that?
The funding distribution for federal and state projects is set. The federal funds are provided. Currently, there's been some variability over the years in different special programs, but typically are 95% federal funds. The state participates in 50% of the non-federal share, so we provide a 2.5% match, and the locals provide a 2.5% match. Sometimes the federal dollars are at 90%, so it's a 95-5 split. Our state and local airport aid program is a 75% state share with a 25% local match.
Okay, and we're talking about general, maintenance and safety improvements and stuff like that. But as far as like infrastructure development,
all projects.
Oh yeah, so all projects, is there a let's say you've got 2 level 2 airports that are competing for a level 3 upgrade. They want that extra 500 feet. Is there I'm assuming we prioritize those municipalities that are willing to put 50%, county money into that upgrade process, as opposed to those that want to be 95% state funded? Because a lot of that income that's coming into them is not just state, it's coming into that municipality or that county is getting the benefit from that airport improvement.
Let me maybe restate your question one more time, because I'm not sure that I understand about the prioritization of 2 projects. Do what? We prioritize based on we have a state priority ranking system for state dollars, and then the FAA has a priority ranking system for federal dollars. And again, it's the state ranking system gives priority to, and I'll use the word smaller, to the airports that don't compete well for federal dollars. So we prioritize those. The highest priority projects are going to be those that touch the runway, whether it's rehabilitation of the pavement or extensions. And then next are our taxiways, obstruction clearing projects for safety and those types of things. But we expect and require that the local governments provide the required match. So it's not necessarily a choice of one community. The projects are prioritized, and the airports are expected to provide the appropriate matching local match.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Now I think it does. I think
Okay.
there's more to it, but I get the gist.
Representative Knight, I believe you have a question.
Probably just a follow-up or a tangent to the discussion that's going on. Obviously, I've grown more experienced in aviation than I ever dreamed I would as far as building an airport. But just to sort of restate, there are certain projects on an airport, at least for a new airport, that the feds will not. There will not be federal funding. And I think that goes back, Carol, to your 25% match statement. I know in our case, I think an example would be the terminal, right?
Correct.
That would be up to the local and state to fund. So those are issues that I think, again, this committee is wise to start asking questions to as to, you know, what do we do when it's state local? Because those are very expensive items, even for the local and the state to upgrade those projects. And one additional comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman or Chairman, again, part of that funding that we do allocate towards GDOT and the Carroll's division here is just safety. It's running about, what is it, $2-3 million a year of our state funds are just to run the department, to do the general safety visits and looking at. Is that correct?
The administrative piece of the program is approximately $2.5 million annually.
Senator Harper. Chairman, Carol, thank you. Thank you for being here. I may be getting a little ahead of you considering the slide you got in front of us, project funding eligibility. But it's kind of tying into the discussion that we're kind of having right now anyway. And I think you are correct. And I think one of the things the General Assembly has done, I think, has done a really good job of, and the governor and past governors over the years, is ensuring that we put enough funding in the state budget to maximize that federal drawdown. And which has been significantly important in funding airport infrastructure needs across the state. I think though, and we're kind of leading in that direction, the where we go in doing that, what has suffered in that arena is that sometimes there's not enough funds to address those projects that we can't use federal dollars on, or that we can't use. And there may be a lack of funding in that arena. Would that be kind of an okay or a somewhat decent assessment of kind of the discussion that we just kind of basically had?
Absolutely. You read
Okay.
my mind.
Okay.
I was going to say that later on.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get ahead of you, but
no.
we were kind of already heading down that path. So I think it's important to point out, and because airport, and I think a lot of you that may have not dove into this as much, or maybe, and others of you that understand this better than I do, airport funding, just like highway and road funding, is very complicated. There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces and a lot of different places where all this can come together. And I think it's important, and I appreciate you kind of laying it out, that we have a better understanding of how all of those parts and pieces fit together. Because a lot of the things that I've always heard is, well, we get federal dollars. Well, we do get federal dollars, but we're already maximizing those federal dollars. We also have to have state dollars to address needs that are there that sometimes we just don't have that funding for. But anyway, look forward to the rest of your presentation.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I'll be extremely brief because I don't want to. I know you've got more presentation, but what the senator said is exactly what my big concern, and I think it fits into this perfectly. You talk about, I've got two class 3 airports, I'm very blessed. You know, we also have the most pilots in the country in Fayette, Coweta County. But so I've got, you know, Fayette County and Coweta County, the Noonan airports, they're both class 3. They're very similar when you talk about, you know, they both have an ILS. They both have, you know, a 5,500 foot runway, but one airport has 6 times the economic impact of the other one. And it's all those non-tangible things that we're not talking about here. And so my question is, when we talk about major capital improvements to an airport, you know, they've got a $26 million plan that they're working on right now, and they're willing to invest 70% from the county level in that investment, but they need state investment because they can't get the funding. The biggest problem for them is the tarmac, because it's not they can't take out the loans and the requirement for that because it doesn't have a capital that's coming from it like they do rent for hangar space and all the other stuff. And so my question just for us is, when we prioritize those big capital improvements, you know, for that 13 million or whatever it take from the state, that's a whole heck of a lot of class 2 and class 1 airports that we could be repaving and doing safety stuff for it. So how do we, that's what I was asking, how do we prioritize those types of things that would have a 6-time multiplier economic return versus the GA stuff that may have a much lower economic return for the same cost?
Well,
I hope that
actually,
makes sense.
in the project funding eligibility, FAA does not consider projects that have an economic development component eligible. But in Georgia, in our priority system, we actually award an additional 10 points for projects that have an economic development component. So we do capture that aspect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Ms.
you
Michael?
mentioned something else, excuse me. You mentioned something else too, in regards to airports that may be willing to put in a greater share. And both FAA and at GDOT, we consider if an airport is offering a greater local share, that certainly increases the priority ranking points, makes it a more favorable project.
I believe Ms. Macaluso has a question.
Actually, I just wanted to loop back into something that Carol was saying a little bit earlier about the different buckets of funding, the discretionary and the entitlement funding. I just wanted to say what often happens is that entitlement funding, we can roll over up to, I believe, 3 years. So what often happens is the airport doesn't use that 150 annually. They use that to offset a larger discretionary project. So it helps those federal dollars stretch further. So generally speaking, we don't use that 150 for whatever project that we want to use it for. We're using it to hold off for our bigger projects.
And that's true for the bulk of the airports in the metro area that compete very well for discretionary dollars. They usually take those $150,000 annual entitlements and put those with the discretionary funding.
And just to be timely, I want to kind of move things along. I know we want to adjourn at noon, so we got a couple other things going on.
Okay, so let me shift into high gear here. And actually, much of the questions that you have are addressed in slides, so we can move through those very quickly. But again, there is the biggest takeaway from this slide is there are different priorities on the federal side for funding versus our state airport aid program. Just sort of our state airport aid program works to fill in those gaps. But again, there are many projects that are not eligible for federal funding on an airport. So that really emphasizes the importance of those state and local projects. Next slide. Let's see. And this is one other point I'd like to make is that for federal funding eligibility, we actually have 6 airports that are not eligible for federal funding. They are not recognized in FAA's national system. And that is because they have criteria to be in the national system, and those 6 airports don't meet the criteria, and we don't have any way currently for them to meet the criteria. Some of them are in close proximity to other airports, et cetera. FAA also has a policy that airports with less than 10 based aircraft are not eligible for that $150,000 entitlement funding. And so currently we have 7 airports that are not eligible for that $150,000 entitlement. FAA takes a snapshot of their national system every 2 years. They're going to have a snapshot this December. And when that snapshot is taken, we think that Ashburn will actually have more than 10 based aircraft and again be eligible. But we also think that we will have 4 airports that will come onto this list. That's Alma, Nahunta, Reedsville, and Montezuma. So the state program, again, is vitally important to these airports because they have no other source rather than local funds to help improve their airports. Next slide. And just to give a quick snapshot of what state airport aid program funding looks like across the Southeast when you think about the states that we compete with for economic development opportunities. The state of Florida is at the top of the list. They have approximately the same number of airports that we do that are eligible for funding. They have a $329 million annual airport aid program. And I can tell you, Rob Burr, who is one of your committee members, our worst nightmare is for an airport manager to have worked in Florida and come to Georgia. I know. Just kidding, just kidding. North Carolina also has a very robustly funded program at $125 million. And then our neighbors in Alabama round out the bottom of the list at $3.3 million. But certainly you can see that in Georgia, we have a robust number of airports that with needs. Next slide. Our historic annual state funding, you can see from 2011, we were, I think it was $1.7 million in annual airport aid funding. This year, we were at 17 million. And so certainly appreciative of those increases. But when we think back to Governor Sanders and the cost of construction, those dollars, are somewhat impacted by inflation and the cost of construction. Next slide. This is a 10 or 11-year average for our federal funding. And you can see overall, we're a little over 60 million in FY21. We don't have the 22 numbers yet. And actually there's a month, almost several weeks left in the federal fiscal year. And so we are got our fingers crossed that we might be able to still bring in another few federal discretionary dollars. So we never give up hope until September 30th. But that funding, looking at the graph, has been relatively stable over the years. Next slide. And then this is a graph. It just depicts the eligible funding that we have on the bottom, the orange line, total federal and state dollars versus the needs, the applications that we receive every year. And you can see that there is, little 100-ish plus million based on applications for a deficit. Next slide. And then for our FY22 program, we have our federal funds. We'll have a total program of approximately, we hope, 72 million based on, depending on how much federal funding we receive. We anticipate we'll have 9.2 million in local investment, 17 million in state funds, and that will fund about 124 projects of the nearly 300 that were applied for. So again, you still see a $130 million deficit based on applications. Next slide. Next slide. And so with that, I'll be happy to take any questions, but you've asked a lot already.
Seeing no questions, and appreciate your presentation, Carol. Said great to have you here. It's unfortunate to see you going for retirement at the end of the year, but we know that you'll pop up somewhere else in a great position. So
absolutely. Well, I'm always here to help. So please call on me anytime. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Okay, next up, Mr. Travis. Now, how do we say it? Valeni? Very close, with the National Association of State aviation officials.
So if you can, do I need to, there you go, pull up the next presentation. Chairman Gann, Chairman Gasper, it's a pleasure to be here today. Again, my name is Travis Valine. I am going to make one correction. I'm not with the Association of State Aviation Officials. However, I used to be a state director in Colorado for 20 years and was a colleague to Carol. So I would be remiss if I did not say that Georgia is second to none in its state leadership. While other states may outfund their airport system, nobody has provided more leadership to their community than the state of Georgia through Carol's leadership and Steve. So it's been an honor to work with Carol and Steve, and you've got somebody that's extremely special there. So I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about the economic impact of your airport system. It was a study that was done right before COVID hit. It's kind of the sexy stuff of the system. Carol talked a lot about how the system is comprised and the airports that make it up. This is the study that actually shows you your return on investment, what these airports mean to their communities and what it means to the state economy. Next slide, please. So the presentation is actually the same number of airports as Carol talked about, 103 airports. The thing that we want to make sure that you recognize is that Hartsfield-Jackson did their economic impact in 2017. So we just collected that study and added it into ours, which was we collected data in 2019 for about 12 months, and the outcome, the final report was done in 2020. So these numbers are pre-COVID, and it's a snapshot in time. Next slide. For all of you that had a mother that would put you up against the wall every year before you'd go to school and mark on how high you were because she was afraid that you would get shorter, this is the measuring stick for airports in Georgia. So part of the message is all airports have increased in value since the last study was completed in 2011. 2011, the total economic impact was about 62.6 billion. The new impact in 2020, 73.7 billion, or about an 18% increase. So without a doubt, there's lots of value in airports, and that value is continuing to increase over time. It represented about 450,000 jobs statewide, over $20 billion in payroll, and almost 74 billion in total annual economic activity. So when you break that down with Hartsfield, this is not uncommon for states that have a large primary hub. For instance, my state in Colorado, Denver International Airport, represented 87% of our annual economic activity. So this is very common when you've got a Jackson Hartsfield plus a very vibrant general aviation and commercial service system. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of walk through this kind of fast because this is really more of just the methodology. One of the things that when we started this study that Carol and Steve insisted is that we've got to be able to defend the numbers. When somebody stands up and says, hey, I've been to my little airport, there's 15 airplanes out there, there's not 15 jobs out there. There's no way. So one of the things that we focused in on is the ability to defend the numbers. And we do that by how we collect the data. So we've got 6 impact categories that we collected data on, which was airport management, business tenants, annual capital investment, the projects that these airports are having on an annual basis, the expenditures by general aviation visitors and commercial service visitors. Next slide. In each of those categories, we measured what the employment was, the payroll of each of those categories, the spending, and then their total economic activity. Next slide. So this was not a process that the state of Georgia or my firm came up with. This was a process that is approved and is we've got some guidance from the FAA.
So what we do is not only do we collect all the data that's on the airfield, businesses that we can validate, payrolls that we can validate, but we also model how those dollars move from aviation out into the community. So for those of us that make our living in aviation, we have children that require braces. We have cars that require tires. We have homes that require improvements. So we actually track how that money goes out and spins throughout the different part of the economy. Next slide, please. So some key study inputs that we found throughout the Georgia study is that we found 580 unique business tenants. Airports are job creators, and this inventory of the 580 tenants shows that. We visited all the study airports, so we were boots on the ground, face to face with airport managers, sometimes annoying, but we kept at it. What we had was over 8,200 surveys from actual visitors. That provided a lot of really good data. And I would say this, of all the studies that we've done, that is the most surveys that we've received from visitors. So when you go up and ask a visitor, why are you here? Where are you staying? How much are you spending? How long are you staying? You get a lot of really good data. In that data, we found that 357,000 visiting general aviation aircraft generated 1.4 million visitors to the state of Georgia. We found that each visitor ranged from $54 to $192 per trip. 57% of all the people that get off airplanes in 1 year in the state of Georgia are visitors. They're not local. So you've got a lot of people coming to visit the state. That generated about 1.1 million commercial visitors. And the average spending of somebody that gets off a commercial airplane is about $440 per trip. Now, I did my part yesterday by getting off an airplane in Denver, from Denver, in Atlanta, met some friends down by the ballpark, had a great time, had a great dinner, left some Colorado money in Atlanta, Georgia. So it proves that those folks getting off commercial airplanes that will spend the money. Next slide, please. These are just breakdowns. So these are just kind of how we slice and dice the different dollars and the different categories. And really all I'm going to point out for most of these slides is that you will notice that airport business tenants drive most of the dollars that we generate in aviation. So total employment for the study airports, 67,260, but of those 47,000 came from tenants on the airfield. Again, airports are job creators. Next slide. Total payroll, 3.5 billion. Of that 3.5 billion, 3 billion of that, again, comes from the tenants. Next slide. Total spending, 3.4 billion in spending, 1.9 billion come from airport tenants, 845.9 million come from commercial visitors. General aviation isn't really that far behind at 203 million. So again, what we find is visitors to the state leave the money behind when they come. Next slide. And then the last one is total economic activity, $6.9 billion from the study airports. Again, leading the way were the tenants at 4.8 billion, followed by commercial visitors at 1.1. Next slide. This might get to one of the questions that was asked earlier about the value. We did collect in this study what state and sales tax are generated at our airports in Georgia. Found 283.3 million is generated in local tax revenue. And then Hartsfield generates about $1 billion in local tax revenue. So not only do they generate dollars from people coming in, they generate dollars from the businesses that they create on the airfield themselves. Next slide. It's very hard in aviation to understand what an airplane, why it comes to a community, what it's here to do, what the people here are doing. But we in this study scrubbed some FAA data, and the FAA has a database that has flight following information. Anybody that puts in any type of request to the FAA for flight following, radar tracked information, if you put in a flight plan, so we could actually track real traffic in Georgia. Now, is it all the traffic? Absolutely not. But it's defined and it's defendable traffic. And in that, we found that 62% of all the airports in the state on the general aviation side connect to an international destination. They go to 68 different countries, 287 different destinations outside the United States. And the longest route that we found was Georgia to Abu Dhabi. Flights by region, South America, Caribbean islands, followed by Europe and the Middle East, and 23% to Canada. So we kind of talk a lot about general aviation is connecting us from community to community, but it also connects us to different parts of the world. Next slide. We also did an analysis on all the commercial flights that come from Georgia, from your 8 commercial service airports, 22 different airlines, a total of 1,400 total daily flights, destinations, top destinations, New York, Boston, Los Angeles, Fort Lauderdale, and Chicago, with Florida, New York, Texas, California, and Illinois being the top state destinations for those carriers. Next slide. Domestic general aviation flights. I think this is a really interesting slide because of the 1,535 direct point-to-point destinations that we found over the course of 12 months, 28% of all the flights originate and terminate to a Georgia to Georgia community. So if you're looking at that from the DOT, that's 28% of those flights are taking goods, services, and people off the highway system. Before this information, we could never understand really how does the intermodal transportation system of aviation help the highway side. But that's interesting. Top 5 states: Florida, North Carolina, Alabama, South Carolina, and Tennessee. The general aviation community likes Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, Houston, and Greenville. So when Carol started to compare and said her worst nightmare was from an airport manager from Florida or North Carolina to come to Georgia, can you imagine the airplanes that sometimes leave Georgia and land in other states, and they take a look at the infrastructure there? There's an impact. Next slide.
Wait, Senator Harper, just for, because I know exactly what you're saying, but maybe just for clarification to the members of the committee, can you explain the difference between general aviation and commercial aviation?
Okay.
Because when you talk general aviation and what happens in general aviation, and then you talk about commercial aviation, I know what that means. But just to ensure that everybody in here knows that those are 2 distinctive categories, because I think it's important for the data that you're sharing, the impact that general aviation has on our state, in conjunction with the impact that commercial aviation has on our state.
Absolutely. So when we talk about general aviation, those are aircraft that are owned and operated by individuals like ourselves. We don't go through TSA. Most of these airplanes are in local communities. Sometimes they're owned by companies, but mostly individual airplanes anywhere. And in this study, we found that at general aviation, when the visitors come to Georgia, there are typically 3 to 4 people in that airplane. Commercial aviation, of course, is when we go to Atlanta Hartsfield or a commercial service airport, go through TSA security. We get an explanation of how to put a seatbelt on and whether we want water or Coke. So extremely different, but both very, very viable and very important. Is that good enough?
That's
okay.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you. Representative Knight.
Sort of a follow-up again to Senator Harper's uh, definition of general aviation versus commercial. One of my notes was, could you go over again, you said commercial study airports. So how do you define commercial study airports is the first question.
Yep. So in this study, any airport that had scheduled commercial service into its community was defined as a commercial service airport. Now, that does not mean that many of those airports, or actually all of those airports, have a very vibrant and a lot and strong general aviation contingent at them. So is that correct, Carol? I mean, so when we talk about like Valdosta, right? Valdosta would be a commercial service airport in this study.
So the numbers that we're seeing though, as far as how you did the study, would include on the commercial side, would include the general aviation activity defined as commercial. Is that true?
No. What we did at those communities is we went in and the surveys that we did, we looked at the enplanements. So we were able to divide that out. But so I guess I'm not exactly sure on your question is, so Valdosta, is that included in the commercial column or is it included in the GA column? Is that the
Yes,
question?
That's yes.
Yeah, we've included it in the commercial column.
So I guess maybe something that would help us is, again, federal versus state and our needs and, priorities. Do you have the data though that would bifurcate that commercial use of these, I guess, Part 139 airports that have a commercial flight in versus the general aviation that is also very vibrant at those airports also?
In this study, we didn't take those airports and divide that out per airport.
You did or did?
I don't believe that we did. Now, one of the things that we'll get to here in a second is each airport will have an individual report. So Valdosta will have a report. It'll talk about its commercial visitors. It'll talk about its general aviation visitors, and it'll talk about the impacts of both. So for those airports, that information is provided to them. But in the study findings, as we add the numbers together, it's not broken out in the total number, but it is broken out by airport. So Valdosta knows what the impact of its commercial side of the operation is versus its general aviation side. I don't know if we can rerun this slide. I was talking back up and then, so on any given day, if you were able to just sit back and watch the Georgia aviation system come to life, you would find that it connects to communities throughout the world. And this was just a visualization to say, if we could do that, this is what your aviation system does every day, 365 days a year. Next slide. So study products that came from this report. We've got the individual airport reports, which I think are very valuable for community leaders, project fact sheet. One of the things that's a little bit unique about this study is there's a calculator. So if a community is approached by a business that says maybe wants to expand their fixed base operator at the airport, and they're going to project that they're going to have 5 jobs that pay an average of $60,000 a year, there's actually a calculator that a community can use that will generate what that economic impact of that investment will be to the local community. So that's pretty powerful, either when companies want to come or sometimes when companies want to leave. You can run those what if scenarios. Next slide. Study findings, kind of at the end of the day, what we found is, of course, the value of airports throughout Georgia has increased from 2011 to 2020. Employment's grown from 36,000 to almost a little over 67,000. Payroll has jumped from 1.5 billion to 3.5 billion. Economic activity has grown from 4.4 billion to 6.9 billion. Carol talked a little bit about this, the annual need for the airport, the system airports is 411 million, but your return on investment is 6.9 billion. At the end of the day, airports support about 13% of all Georgia employment. And it's responsible for about 15% of the gross state product. Yes, sir.
411 million annual investment. Is that something like 411 million for ever? I mean, on out, or is that catching up with something, or is that just, that's our standard static need for the state?
Carol will probably be best to answer that, but that 411, it's an annual number for how long?
Right.
5 years.
We'll get that one out after we end our meeting, so get the details on that. Go ahead.
Yep, next slide. And I don't know if we've got the video, Steve. Okay, okay. Any questions you may have?
Appreciate your presentation. You know, it's kind of, looks like it ought to be a good return on investment, but we'll keep working on the study committee for a little while longer.
Okay.
And then, we can get there. When we talk about economic development, our next speaker is going to be Chris Clark with the Georgia Chamber. And as they say, it's all about business here in Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me jump the line here. I come to you today representing 50,000 Georgia businesses, 163 local chambers. I've served previously on the Freight and Logistics Committee and on that 2014 study committee that led to our last transportation bill. And the reason that the chamber is so involved in these issues, the reason that we have the Georgia Transportation Alliance, quite frankly, is this is critical for business growth. Our members want to be able to move products, goods around this state in an efficient, affordable manner. We also want to be the best place to do business the 9th, 10th, and 11th year in a row, and infrastructure matters. It's a very important part of what we do. You've got a lot of numbers today, and I don't have a presentation for you, but I want to just tell you a couple of stories and give you a little food for thought in a couple of minutes here. You know, I was a economic developer at the local level. Carol and I were joking before we first met when I ran the Chamber of Commerce in Hawkinsville, Georgia. And entertained prospects. Every prospect I had for 3 years came into that airport. And I'll be honest with you, that airport in Hawkinsville, Carol, wasn't much to look at. The state pilots loved it because they could go hog hunting and deer hunting while we were out showing the community. But after I came to the state and served as Deputy Commissioner for Economic Development, in that tenure, I visited almost half of the airports in the state. And I can tell you that those airports, particularly in those rural communities, are the front doors for an economic development activity in that community. Shackelford was right. We don't drive into those prospect visits. We fly in, usually in an airplane, sometimes in a helicopter. But when we can land in a community like Sandersville or Douglas and have an incredible facility there, it impacts that company. They're thinking about not only the image that that community is going to have when they fly in their prospects from all over the world or their customers, but also the connectivity that they're going to have in order to do their business. And I think we lose sight of that when we just talk about the numbers. And I don't know how you put an economic value on that first impression of a community, but I can tell you it makes a difference. I got good stories and bad stories. I'll tell you a couple quick bad ones. Had one company, and gosh, I forget the year, but it was the biggest economic development project in the United States that year. And we had one community in Georgia that had the property for that company. But the airport was in poor condition that we actually rented a helicopter to fly them in and landed in a vacant field because we didn't want them to see the airport. We didn't get that prospect. Went to Arkansas, unfortunately. There was another one. I love it. I won't say the name of the community, but they came to Atlanta and they told us they had this incredible facility. It was ready for economic development. Would we come look at it? And we had some prospects, Chairman, that it kind of fit. So I said, fine, I'll take the day. I'll fly down. We'll look at it. The pilots, when we took off, said, are you sure you want to go here? And I said, well, sure. Is there a problem landing? He said, no, sir, just buckle up. The airport for that community was actually a 9-hole golf course that they cleared off the golfers so we could land the plane. And I can tell you that's been 12 years ago and we still don't have a prospect in that community. That's not the kind of quality front door. It was a nice little 9-hole golf course, don't get me wrong, but it's not exactly what we were trying to show. On the other hand, when we were doing the Kia deal in 2005 and 6, we were negotiating this prospect. We had a great piece of property and it all came down to this one meeting in West Point where there was the blessing of the site and we flew in the CEO from Korea of Kia to look at that site. And the only thing that the prospect team cared about was, did we have a facility that was adequate to land their Gulfstream? When we took them to that LaGrange Callaway Airport, it made all the difference. I'm not saying that's why we got Kia, but it played a role that day in sending that image and that message to those folks. And so it does matter. It also matters with 2 big projects and programs that the Georgia Chamber's been proud to work on for a long time. The state of Georgia has the 2 longest running economic development programs in the country. One's called the Red Carpet Tour. We started in 1960, where we bring people to the Masters for a couple of days and we get to, while they're here, we go show them other communities in Georgia. And it's led to tens of billions of dollars of investment. And then we have a program that's 34 years old called the Georgia Quail Hunt, do the same thing in Southwest Georgia. The only way that program matters, the only way that it works is the fact that Augusta, Savannah, Brunswick, Columbus, Albany, and Valdosta have those airports that allow us to fly prospects in and out of and land our Delta planes there. But I will tell you, there are several other communities we would love to take that tour to show off in this state that we can't because we don't have the facilities or the runways of the right length. So my bottom point here is, and I know everyone here knows this, these airports matter for much more than maybe what you think every day. But I also want to take a minute and share with you just a couple of insights. We've talked about the past and the future. I want to talk about the future a little bit more. 2 years ago, the Georgia Chamber launched an effort called the New Georgia Economy, where we're spending all of our time looking at the changes that are happening in the economy around the world and how they're going to impact the state of Georgia to make sure that we've got the right policies in place, the right investments in place to be competitive as a state. When we look at these issues of airports, and particularly and I don't know all my classes, my general aviation airports and some of my commercial, I pulled a couple of just points I want us as a study committee to think about. These come from some work by McKinsey and Deloitte and E&I. Overall, as you look at the next 5 to 10 years, air passenger flights are going to increase to almost 6.8 billion from where we are today of 4 billion. So we're going to add almost 2 billion more people taken to the air. A lot of that activity sure is going to go through Hartsfield Jackson, our big airports, but more and more are going to come through our second tier, our smaller airports. You're going to see a lot of economic development opportunity around the Internet of Things in the aviation sector, right? As we connect your cars, we've got a pilot program now Russell's told us about, where your car pulls up to a red light and the red light can change, right? Because it's reading what's in all the cars. We're getting to that point in aviation. All the data that we're going to have, the companies are going to have to build out how we use that data, store it, build all the economic opportunities. Just as the governor's announced his e-mobility task force because of electronic cars, data, and how we have the right policies, we need to be thinking about that as we have this Internet of Things for the aviation sector. We know right now that domestic air travel has returned. We're seeing a slower return of business travel, but by every indication, we're going to get back to business travel, but it will probably not be at the same level through our big commercial airports. It's probably going to be through our smaller airports with private aviation. And I think we need to be prepared for that. We're going to see more air cargo, particularly as our battle with China increases and trade wars increase. You're going to see more cargo on airplanes. You're also going to see an incredible growth, and we're already seeing it here in Georgia, in the drone sector, particularly when we're dealing with larger drones. Those have a great opportunity to be placed at our smaller airports. Just look at this number. Last year in the US, we had about a $5 billion industry from the drone sector. By 2025, which is 4 years from now, it'll be almost $70 billion of economic activity. So where are those facilities going to go? Where can we build those out? These airports have that opportunity. And lastly, I think this committee really needs to think about the infrastructure of those airports beyond just the typical traditional combustible engine facilities that we have. If you look at everything that's happening in the aviation industry today, it's all moving toward, believe it or not, electric airplanes. Getting to that point, you're going to see electric commercial aviation in about 36 months. What does that mean for our facilities? It means we're going to need hydrogen refueling. We're going to need extremely fast power charging, rapid battery charging, just like you're going to need at every truck stop in the country eventually. And so I don't know that we'll do our job, Mr. Chairman, if we don't think about that long-term infrastructure needs beyond just repaving the runways. What's the future of this going to look like? And can we jump ahead of everybody else? And that's why we're serving here. I would love to be able to bring in McKinsey or one of our other consultancies to talk about some of these future trends as this committee goes forward, but happy and proud to be on the committee and look forward to working with all y'all. Any questions, Mr. Chairman, or we'll keep it moving if not?
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
This truly is all about the business.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Next, I believe I've got Mayor Tony Paulk from Douglas, Georgia. Said they, and one of the things that everything's better in Coffee County, they tell me, but I'm just saying. Everybody tells me they want to wake up in coffee.
I believe it. Good morning. How's everybody doing? My name is Tony. I represent the great city of Douglas, Georgia, and I'm here to talk about one of the jewels of our community is our municipal airport. The city of Douglas, we're approximately 11,700 citizens. We're in the great county of Coffee. That's about 43,500 citizens. Where is Douglas? We get asked that question all the time. We're 60 miles from Valdosta. We're 45 miles from Tifton. We're about 35 miles from Waycross. Why do we have to say that? Because if you're going to Douglas, it's intentional. So we don't have no Savannah Airport. We don't have I-16 and we don't have I-75. Our airport puts the city of Douglas and Coffee County on the map. It's an eye opener. When we entertain businesses or industries and we tell them, oh, you can just land in our municipal airport, all of a sudden, we have their attention. And I mean, we have their full attention. In the city of Douglas, we try to be very progressive. We try to think outside of the box. We always say that the state of Georgia is the #1 place to do business. In the city of Douglas and Coffee County, we say our airports brings that business to this great state of Georgia. One of the things that we like to talk about when we talk about the economic impact, everybody says the airport has a great impact. At the Georgia Municipal Association conference in Savannah last month, the main word was reimagine. Can you just reimagine the great state of Georgia without the Atlanta airport? That impact for the great state of Georgia is equivalent in the eyes of the city of Douglas and Coffee County. Without that airport, we don't exist. Walmart Distribution is one of our largest employers. For us, that's a big deal. They have an annual payroll of about $40 million. Just think about that. That's just one industry that brings $40 million to our small community. But I would say, as the mayor of the city of Douglas, I would say about 75% of all the economic impact, those individuals land at our airport. We're a small community and we're sort of isolated, we have the opportunity with our airport to have physicians to fly in. Right now, we have about 10 physicians. The furthest one away is South Carolina. Now, just think about that. South Carolina flies to that great city of Douglas just to provide physician services to our community. We have we're getting ready to have another helicopter located there for live flight. So there's just a number of things that we're able to do in the city of Douglas. And the biggest thing that we're getting ready to do right now in the city of Douglas that we consider to be a game changer. We're getting ready to drop an entire aviation ecosystem in the city of Douglas. And what does that mean to us? That means everything. We can't even sit down and fathom or calculate the impact. We're talking about bringing in a paint facility. We're talking about bringing in flight instructors. We're talking about chartered services. We're talking about a opportunity where in the city of Douglas and Coffee County, we sit down as a leadership team and we make big decisions because we have to think outside the box. And when we talk about the leadership team, we're talking about the Board of Education. We're talking about the technical college. We're talking about our college. We're talking about the sheriff department. We're talking about our judges. We're talking about industries. We're talking about local businesses that we all put in one room and sit down and have a conversation about. Then we come up with this opportunity here as far as this ecosystem. How great would it be for me to be able to just drive about 4 miles to our local airport, get on a plane and fly to Jacksonville? Instead of drive to Jacksonville, I'll make that 3 hours and 15-minute trip to the Atlanta airport. I can't express to you how valuable that airport is to us. And any dollar that the city of Douglas gets from the state or the federal government to enhance our airport, it is a major deal to us. And we scrutinize those dollars to make sure that we get the best opportunity possible. And that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about dropping the entire ecosystem, aviation ecosystem in the city of Douglas. My last thing is this right here. About 60 or 70 years ago, the city of Douglas was challenged to train fighter pilots for World War II. That facility sat dormant for a while until we got this opportunity here. Being retired from the United States Army, one of the things we do is we recommission. We want to recommission our airport to live up to its full potential. During World War II, our 63rd Army Air Force Base trained about 10,500 pilots. Hopefully Tom Hanks is going to do that motion picture about one of the most decorated pilots in World War II, was actually trained in the great city of Douglas. So with that, if you have any questions, I do have Mr. Stephen Markov. He's going to help us out with our public-private partnership to drop this entire ecosystem in the city of Douglas. I think it'll be a great thing.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe you have a video that we might be able to queue up. I'm not sure how long the video is, but we got a few minutes left if
Sure, go ahead.
While
they're bringing it up, Mayor, I have a question. You're a great salesman for the city of Douglas.
Hey,
Good job.
thank you.
You know, and Dominic Larica had told me about you just a little bit when he saw that. I'm very proud of you. Just my question, y'all are very involved in that community airport. Do you provide them extra funding? I mean, I guess this is what this generally is about. Does the city of Douglas, Coffee County, how much money do y'all putting in your local airport?
So basically, this is also to express how important our local airport is. Actually, our local airport, we actually operate our local airport at $100,000 a year loss. Over the last, I think I have my sheet here, over the last 30 years, we've put in approximately, hold on for a second. We put in approximately $2.5 million. I think that the state has put in a little bit over 3.5 million. And we've gotten about 6 million from the federal government.
Yes, sir.
So I just think that down in the city of Douglas and Coffee County, one of the things I forgot to mention about the leadership, we have our great senator over there. He was just in a meeting with us with the governor, took a little time out of his busy schedule to help us out. Dominique Larica and Representative Prickle, whenever we're able to call them, they answer. And that's important to us. That's important. having elected officials on the state level that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, we need you over here. And they respond appropriately. I think we gave him about a 30-minute notice this morning, but he was there. And I think that our local airport in this ecosystem is something that makes us adhere to. Doing businesses in Georgia is the great place to be. Thank y'all for your time. God bless you, and go Trojans.
Video, excuse me.
We're going to go ahead and start the video now.
When Douglas, Georgia was searching for the key to its future, current leaders found the answer in the city's past, more than 75 years ago. At the onset of World War II, the United States faced a critical, insatiable need for thousands of pilots to fight the fight, to carry troops and supplies. To meet this need, the U.S. Army Air Forces contracted airfields nationwide for both the country's defense and pilot training. One of those airfields was in Douglas, Georgia.
In World War II, a group of young men were called upon to defend this nation. The city of Douglas and Coffee County were integral pieces of bringing a flight school to Douglas and Coffee County. Just as 80 years ago, those young adults responded to a need. We believe that in the city of Douglas and Coffee County, we're going to
Yes, I see the video is not up there. I think, Mayor, if you just want to kind of talk about what the video is about really quick, I think that, and then I think the chairman said he'd send out the link to all the committee members yeah, I think if you just kind of explain what the video is about and they'll send it out.
We feel is underutilized. As you can see, or was able to see, is that at the beginning you saw World War II flight instructors in the great city of Douglas, Georgia. Well, once that facility was decommissioned, mission accomplished, ran the bad guys out, it sat dormant. So what we're going to do now is to sit down and come up with a way to recommission that. You're going to see that our technical college is deeply involved in this. You're going to see that Dr. Sellers from South Georgia State College is deeply involved in it. You're going to also see Stuart Smith. He's our Economic Development Authority chairperson. And you're going to just hear from business individuals in our community. One of the individuals that you're going to see is Mr. Don Brooks. He's a local investor. He owns a few World War II planes. All he does is sits around and puts them back together and asks me if I want to fly them. And I say, no, don't want to do that. You know, trust you, but I'm going to get on Delta. That's what I'm going to do. But also, you're going to hear a little bit about the ecosystem that I was talking to you about. And if you could, Mr. Chairman, if you could give me about 3 minutes, I could let Mr. Mark come up here and tell you a little bit. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mark. And if you ever need a great place to just come hang out, please come to the city of Douglas. We'll show you a big time. Thank you, Mark.
Hi, I'm Steve Markoff. I'm the chairman, president, CEO of a company called Global Aero Holdings. We're based in Lakeland, Florida. We're all former airline executives. We have an international flight academy. Our maintenance is an FAA certified repair station. We are an air carrier as well, so we're technically an airline. And we, on Monday, are getting our certification for an airframe and power plant mechanics school in in Lakeland. So we will hold more FAA certificates than any organization in the United States. What we're looking to do with Tony, Wiregrass, South Georgia State College, and the airport is to essentially bring that entire ecosystem and dump it into Douglas at once. So within about 4 years, the estimated economic impact would be over $50 million. So we're going to bring charter services. We're going to bring an aircraft power plant mechanics school there. There's a massive shortage of aircraft mechanics. There's a massive shortage of pilots. We're with Wiregrass, we'll be able to avail for U.S. students use of Sallie Mae financing. And as long as they're associated with Wiregrass, we have an agreement between Wiregrass and South Georgia State College for 300 extra dorm rooms. We'll have dorms, room and board for students. So I heard a lot about economic development, and it is true that aviation is a force multiplier in economic development. But the beauty of this is for me, when I look at from a business point of view, I have all of these assets, or the mayor has all of these assets that are not utilized. And here we're going to bring, 100 plus students a year for flight training, 50 students a year, or 50 to 100 students a year for A&P school training. We're going to bring charter services to the community. We've met with the business leaders. A bunch of them want to have aircraft there that they're willing to buy and will manage and put out for charter when they're not using it. There's no maintenance at the field, so we're going to bring a certified repair station, and it'll be a transformative for the community. For the college, we're going to bring students from Asia that'll flight train with us and then matriculate to South Georgia State College as full tuition paying students. So all of those things contribute to the local economy. And, I think that the mayor and the city and the Economic Development Authority have been very, had a lot of foresight in saying, hey, we have all of these underutilized assets. How do we attract somebody to come in here and make them all productive? So that's what we are trying to do, and we're looking forward to it.
Good, because I only asked for 3 minutes.
I'm a lawyer by training, so I can't help myself.
I want to be respected.
Well, we love public-private partnerships and things like that's very great.
Thank you very much.
Enthusiastic. Thank you, guys. Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
just about made it.
I think we closed.
And one thing I just want to throw out there, if I can, Frank, just, as Frank gave the sort of the idea of the different meetings that are coming up. We don't have like this strict schedule of things that we're trying to find out. But we have some. But if you have things you think you guys need to know about this, as we talked the other day at your airport, we hope that you'll come to us, Frank, myself, Ben, or Abby, and say, hey, you need to get this on your schedule. And I think it's real important, members, if you have things that you want us to make sure we know that let's use this wisely, as I think we have today. And I appreciate, Ben, you working very hard to get this meeting together for us today.
Thank you, Chairman Jaspers. And I'm going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting. One of the things I do want to talk offline with you about the school that you want to do down in Douglas. And for me, I know we have a great facility that we've put a lot of effort into down in Eastman, Georgia, and maybe a little bit of partnering there. Yeah. Other than that, we stand adjourned. I thank everybody for their attendance.